How's it going, everybody? Darren here, aka Dr. Dev. In today's video, we're going to continue on with the Learn to Program using C#.NET series. Last time, we focused the video very much around the downloading, installing, and setting up of Visual Studio with a little bit of programming at the end. Now, I'm very happy to tell you guys that from here on out, we're going to be pretty much focusing just on actually programming. So what I'm going to do now to start the video is I'll open up Visual Studio. And under recent, you can see it remembers our last solution. I'm going to click on that to open up our previous solution. And to jog your memory, guys, you'll see it opens up the program.cs file, which is in the project we created last week called drdev.youtubetutorials.learning-c#.beginners. And as you see, we created some string types. And if you remember, strings are used to contain text data. And we then did some prompts with those string types, and we stored the result in some string variables and then printed it out. So what it was holding was information about our name, age, and occupation. This week, however, we're going to learn about number types, or numeric types as they're known. So before we get started, guys, I want you to go to your main function and select all of the lines of code except for the last one and delete it. We're not going to be needing the string stuff for this part of the series because, like I said, we're going to be learning about numeric types. And the first numeric type I want to teach you guys about is called an integer. I'll leave a comment here just to show you guys how it's spelled. Integer. And an integer is the data type that we use to contain positive or negative whole numbers. So what that means is you can't have a value of, let's say, 10.5 in an integer because that's not a whole number. That's using a decimal place. You can't have text in an integer. You couldn't put my name is Darren as a value inside of an integer. You can only have a positive or negative whole number. So let's create our first integer and see how that looks. To create an int, we start off with the type, just like we do with any variable, like we did with the string as well. And the type in C# for an integer is an int. Then we give our variable a name. Let's give this variable a name of a. And then we give it a value. So let's give it a value of 10. So now we have an integer type, which we've given a name of a, and we've given a value of 10. And similar to what we did with the strings, we can actually go ahead and print that out to the console to see its value. So if I print out a, what's going to happen is it's going to print out 10. Let's start it and see if we're right. There we go, 10. Is there anything cool that we can do with an integer? What about adding two integers together or multiplying integers? Is that something we can do? Of course, that's something that we can do. That is, these mathematical operations are a fundamental part of programming. So before we actually do any of those calculations, I want to leave some comments here just to show you guys the symbols that we use for all of the different operations. So to, let's say for addition, we use the plus operator, right? For subtraction, we use the minus operator. For multiplication, we use the star operator, which we can, on standard European keyboards, I believe it's shift plus the 8, number 8, shift plus 8 creates a star. And for division, so for division, we use the / operator. So these are the four standard fundamental operators that we can use in order to add, subtract, multiply, or divide our numeric types. So let's have a little bit of a play with that and see it in action. So if I go ahead and create a second int variable called b, and let's say I give this one a value of 5. All right, cool. And okay, so if I create a variable called, let's say, result, let's say we call this one addition, and I give this one a value of a plus b. So look at that. We are now taking two different variables, a and b, and adding their values together and storing that result into this variable called addition. So what happens is, as you can probably guess, when we're giving this addition variable its value, what happens is it looks at a, it goes and it grabs its value, which is 10. It adds, because plus is the addition operator, 10 with 5, because that's what's in b. and we end up with a value of 15 in there. So let's go ahead and print that out just to be sure that we're not losing our minds. Debug, start without debugging, and there we go, 15. That is the result of A plus B. Let's create another one, shall we? What about subtraction? So let's say this one's going to have a value of A minus B. And if I just copy this console.writeLine and just print out my subtraction, now we can start without debugging. And we can see it prints out 15 and then 5. So the 15 was for the addition, and 5 is the subtraction, because of course 10 minus 5 is 5. You get the point. You can use, I really strongly suggest that you guys mess around with these operators, familiarize yourself with their use, and I won't go into too much detail about using them because I believe it's pretty much self-explanatory. Now that we know about the different mathematical operations that we can do on numeric types, it's important that I explain to you guys the concept of the order of operations. Now, to anybody who's familiar with mathematics, I'm sure most of you guys in school or in college or at university or wherever have done mathematics or learned or studied mathematics. You'll know that multiplication and division always occurs before addition and subtraction. And the same thing applies to the C# language. So let's have an example of that, shall we? I'll quickly delete my two console.writelines, and I'll also delete my addition and subtraction variables. And I'll create a third integer called C, which is equal to, let's say, 2. And if I then say, if I create another integer called result, and I set its value equal to A plus B multiplied by C, if we were to perform this in actual mathematics, we know that what's going to happen is B and C are going to be multiplied together first, and then whatever the result of that is going to be added with A, and that's what's going to be result. So let's do this in our head real quick. B multiplied by C, so 5 multiplied by 2 is 10, and then we add A to that, so that'll be 20. And if we print that out just to prove it, we can see. So console.writeline result, oh, whoopsie daisies, console.writeline result, and if I start it, we will see I get 20. So it's important that you guys understand the order of the operations. Multiplication and division will always occur before addition and subtraction. But what if we don't want that behavior? What if we want sometimes the addition to happen first? What if we want subtraction to happen first? What if we want one multiplication to happen first, and then we want a load of additions to happen, and then we want a final multiplication? Can we control the order of operations? Because that may seem like something we would want to do, right? Well, luckily we can. We can use parentheses to force a certain order of operations into occurring. So let's have an example. If I take what I previously had, where it was A plus B multiplied by C, I can surround my addition with parentheses to force this happening first. So if I do parentheses here, close parentheses here, now what's going to happen is A and B are going to be added together first, and then the result of that will be multiplied by C. So we're going to get 10 plus 5, which is 15, and then it's going to be multiplied by 2, which is 30. So let's print that out to see. And there you go, 30. So like I said, it's important to understand the order of operations, and it's important to understand that you can force your own order if you wish. Real quickly, I want to take this multiply by C here and change that to a divide by C. So we'll have 10 plus 5, which is 15, divided by C, which is 2. So 15 divided by 2, 7.5, right? But what did we learn about integers? Integers can only contain positive or negative whole numbers. We can't have a 7.5 in an integer. So what's going to happen if we try this division? Let's try it out. 7. That's interesting. That's not a correct value. 15 divided by 2 is not 7. So here you can see one of the limitations of the integer type. An integer operation whereby you're adding, subtracting, and multiplying or dividing integers is always going to return a result which is also an integer. Even though in this case we expected a decimal result, we expected, or at least a fractional result, but we didn't. We got a 7. So this is one of the limitations, and there's more than just one of them to integers. Integers also have minimum and maximum values that can be assigned to them. So let's have a look at that. So if I quickly delete these variables, I'll create a new one called min, and its value is going to be int dot min value. I'll create another one called max, and this one's going to be int dot max value. And this min value and this max value property, these are publicly available constant fields that are on the integer type. That's why we can just reference them like this. And if I print those out real quick, so let's try printing out the min, and then let's try printing out the max, and start it up and see what we get. So there we go. The minimum value is minus 2147483648. And the maximum value is basically the same number, but it's positive, but it doesn't go to 8, it goes to 7, because 0 is also a value that is within that range. So if I close that down now, and I want to talk to you guys about something that's important when we're talking about integer calculations, because as I said, an integer can only contain values within this range. It has a minimum and it has a maximum. So what happens if I perform a calculation which has a result that exceeds those limits? Well, if we do that, we get what is called either an underflow or an overflow condition. And I'll give you guys an example. So here we have an overflow. I'll create an integer called overflow, and it's going to be the result of whatever is in my max value variable plus 1. So max, of course, has the maximum value that the int can hold. And if I add 1 to that, well, it can't have a value that's 1 larger than that. It can only have maximum. So what's going to happen? Well, let's print it and see. So if I do console.writeLine, and if I print out my overflow, start the application, we'll see something very interesting here. So we know that this is our min value, that's our max value, and this is our max value plus 1. And you might notice something very interesting here. It's got the exact same value as our minimum value has. So what happens is we've taken this value, we've added 1 to it, it's overflown, and it's wrapped around all the way back to the lowest value. So by adding 1 to our maximum, we end up on our min value. And if I close that down, because that might be a bit confusing, let's say I add 2 now instead and start the application. You'll see now that the overflow value is 1 larger than the min value. So it's wrapping around to the bottom end of the boundary, and it's adding on the additional values there. So it's taking my max, which is this large number in the middle. If it adds 1 to it, well, it can't, so it goes to the min value. So that's what I get. But because I'm adding 2, it adds an additional 1 to it, and that's why we end up with this value. So a little bit complicated, a little bit difficult to explain. Hopefully you guys get the point. It's just something that I thought you guys should be aware of, because you'll probably be messing around, multiplying, dividing, messing around with large numbers, and it might become confusing. So it's important to understand that there are these limitations to the integer data type. Now, there are other numeric types with different limits and precisions that you would use whenever the integer doesn't necessarily meet your needs, but we're not going to explore those right now, guys. I'll leave that till the next video. And I hope you guys learned something new. I hope it wasn't too confusing. As always, please leave me a like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content, and of course, give me a comment. Let me know how you felt. So, thank you guys so much. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you again next time.